in general in the United States, if you're registered as a Republican, regardless of who's at the top of your ticket, you're going to vote Republican.
My impression of Donald Trump, I'm a born and bred New Yorker,
Yeah.
is a very bad impression. He's not a businessman. Like, this is basically his greatest con ever.
I genuinely have a concern about Joe Biden. I just think the United States needs 4 more years of a bulldog to protect the United States. Well, as you listen to CNN or you listen to BBC, you would think that the federal government of the United States has handled the coronavirus horribly. But even Singapore here, the messaging coming from WHO for the first 3 weeks when everybody was notified about coronavirus, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. I actually think in the Straits Times we had things saying, don't wear a mask, only if you're sick. We had that going on here for 6 weeks. It's hard for me to say, going forward, whether we've done a good job or we haven't. We are a democracy. We have freedom. People have freedom. People have the right to choose to wear a mask or not wear a mask. I choose to wear a mask. But we have freedom in the United States. And I think that what we're seeing on a global scale, looking at the United States, is democracy in action being a bit messy.
It is an amazing thing in America that you cannot compel someone to shut their business down. You cannot force them to do that. You cannot force them to wear a mask. Like, in the end, it is their choice. That being said, when we had a better understanding of the knowledge, someone's choice whether they want to wear a mask, but people do listen to the President of the United States. His encouraging of people going out and he's not saying specifically gathering, but polarizing creates a lot of issues in this huge culture where people think it's not okay. And I think had we had a normal president, either Democrat or Republican, who treated this like a health crisis, I reckon we'd be further out of this crisis than we would be.
I just hope that we can have a broader understanding going forward and that the United States is able to convince its people to wear masks and wipe out where we're having hot spots in the United States. Can we agree with that?
I mean, there's nothing really for me to disagree.
Yeah, so we're agreeing. We're Americans first, and then we're partisans. But this issue of COVID, it's really not political. It's just we love our country and we just wish that the virus could go away. Interesting question. The images that have been brought around the world with regards to recent engagement with police officers and the African American community in the United States they're the most reprehensible things I've ever seen. And they should never be happening. But I want to also share with you some statistics that I think are important that don't get talked about. In the United States last year, 15 unarmed African Americans were killed by police. Now, every single life is valuable and important, but we had over 39 to 59 Caucasians killed by police. We had 32 Hispanics killed by police. So when we talk about violence by police, what are the images that are shown to us? They drive us to want to change because every single action like that by a police officer needs to be addressed. But I do not believe in the United States that police officers are violent against their communities. I don't believe on a general scale that there is specific race targeting by police officers. The statistics don't prove it out. I love my police force. I'm so grateful that they are there to protect the community, to call when I pick up a 911 and I call and I need help. They are at my door at any time of the day, 24 hours. So I think that we have to be very careful as we live overseas, that we do our own research, that we don't necessarily listen to the media that's being shown on television because you're not getting the history or the facts. You're getting an event that took place, which again, these are horrible, horrible events. But it doesn't beget a problem with the total police community in the United States.
Yes, I think police brutality is a huge problem in the United States. If the issues to be defined is purely that by the number of murders and that's it, then I guess there weren't that many murders. But I do think there's a lot of harassment of African Americans that exists on all sorts of levels. Maybe it's light violence, maybe it's intimidation, and I think From my perspective, it was something I've never had an issue with the police. My African American friends I speak to, and I've been around groups of them, and I'm in university. Every single one of them has multiple anecdotes. Whether they've been stopped for no reason. Some of them, have been really intimidated to the point they're scared and they don't know what to do. I'll say this: I've never had that experience. Like, the police have never done anything to me in the United States. These things just exist. And we can go into the history of why this happened, how the police force was set up and its purpose. But these things exist, and these are real wrongs that need to be corrected. If the statistics were 100% accurate and it's just 15 murders, then every time these things happen, African Americans wouldn't react this way. They're not.
No, and I agree with you. But what I wanted to say to clarify what I was saying, you were talking about police brutality. And in my mind, when I heard police brutality, I was going to police murder, the killing of innocent African Americans, and the things that you've seen on television that required you to ask that question. The deaths of unarmed African Americans needs to stop. Police need to be more conscious of what they're doing. All I'm saying is that if you look at what we're talking about, they're talking about the killing of African Americans, it's a constant thing, we're under threat. If we could have a normal conversation about these issues where we could come together and talk about changing structural perceptions and engagements with the communities, I think we would be far better off.
So I think what's happened is basically opinionists get confused for legitimate journalists. And unfortunately, those people have actually gained a louder voice than the legitimate journalists, creating a lot of basically misinformation. Because of social media, you have basically this thing where you have a comment from some sort of expert, and then basically someone makes a really ridiculous comment about it, and they're both the same number of characters, and they get the same type of prominence. And what's also happened is because basically media has become completely democratized and free, especially in the United States, is you have a lot of these opinion journalism type outlets, several of them that have more followers and hits per month than a lot of these legitimate journalists. And this is the thing that creates, as you're saying, the whole idea of fake news. I think fake news personally is actually just a term that the president uses to attack the media for the most part. But I think the legitimate news organizations, more specifically when I say that the newspapers tend to continue to be much more good arbitrators of information than not.
It's very hard for me to call it fake. I just think it's opinion. It's a significant amount of people's opinion on an issue that doesn't get the raw data first. I think if you look at the major media outlets in the United States, you have a lot of opinion injected into where the facts are, and it doesn't allow you to make that independent perspective on an issue because you get it in sort of a skewed form on one station and the opposite skewed form on that station. So then none of it matches up because you don't know what the base started with.
It's just unfortunate we just have social media amplifying in all these different opinions in a way that you're not sure which is actually getting the proper amount of airtime. And this is also going back even to the coronavirus. Why there's so much is getting amplified that probably it shouldn't, that you can't control in these completely democratized media type environments. Even if they don't like Donald Trump, I think there's actually deep respect and appreciation for our country that in all this chaos, all these rights that necessarily don't exist in other countries, we somehow still manage to carry on. Probably the thing they respected the most was America's democratic element. And politicians lie, they all lie, but specifically America's democratic ideal, specifically the vote itself, was never questioned and was always taken very, very seriously. And this is something that the current president toys around with, makes a joke, or maybe he's not joking, in order just to win the election, claims that there's mass fraud with ballots. And prior to him, both Republicans and Democrats never tried to undermine the political system, the vote in any sort of way. And I think this is more worrying than actually causes any sort of rancor towards the United States.
It's unfortunate that the community here doesn't always get the full story so that there can be a complete understanding of what's taking place in the United States. And I think if you understood where the Republican Party comes from and what the fundamentals are and the structures of our beliefs, you would have a much better understanding and familiarity and comfort level with the policies and procedures in the United States. Perhaps not the personalities, but the policies and procedures that the Republican Party stands for. I do believe many Singaporeans would find that to be where you stand on many issues. I'm very grateful, first of all, that you were able to come and for us to be able to talk about the United States and what goes on there from sort of two different political parties, but with similar perspectives on many issues.
Yeah, I just want to say it's really fun. I think, as I said before, politics is like team sports, and one thing that's really, that I always enjoy in the United States are the loud discussions you have with your friends, and whether the family dinners and everyone has different opinions. But most of the time, it's much more fun than it isn't. And so, in that sense, like that to me, this is just fun. That's why I wanted to do this, was just kind of to have that discussion, because I missed that interaction. So that's been great. So I really appreciate that.
Bye.